Saludo. Hello. Roma, Italy, Locum de Sortis. For those still learning Latin, it means the place of my birth. Gee, I make a nice statua. Now let us have a look around the city of Rome. Before we start, I would like you to meet Merlin. He is someone I snatched from another presentation I was working on. We will start in the area called the capital.
Campidoglio is the seat of the Roman municipality. The immortal letters STQR representing the word Senatus Populus Romanus, meaning the Senate and people of Rome.
This is a model showing the Capitolium and Forum Romanum. We will start on the top of the Capitolinus Mons, or Capitoline Hills. As you see in the model, the Capitoline was actually two hills, with a depression between them, the Capitol and the Arx. The Capitoline Hill is generally believed to have been the place of execution for traitors.
Its name was derived from the magnificent temple adorning its summit, the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, consecrated in 509 BC. It was dedicated to Jupiter, Juno and Minerva.
Now let's see what it looks like today. The temple was destroyed by fire in 80 AD, after being destroyed and rebuilt twice before.
Michelangelo designed the Coordinate on the palaces and piazza of the Capitol as, with a few exceptions, we see them today.
The building at our back, which I will show you in a minute, is the Palazzo Senatorio, built after 1143 as a meeting place for 56 senators, who were elected as a result of a new rising in 1143. The Senate was built on top of the ruins of the Tabularium or Record Office, which was built in 78 BC. Some of the original structure can still be seen.
We are looking down the hill away from the Forum area. To my left is the Palazzo di Conservatorium and the right Palazzo del Museo Capitolino. Both contain art from Greek and Roman times.
Let us look at the Coordinata more closely. Behind the statue of Marcus Aurelius is the Palazzo Senatorio. Marcus Aurelius came after me in the year 121 AD. He was one of the greatest emperors in Roman history and one of the most profoundly intellectual monarchs, ruling from 161 to 180 AD. This famous statue has become the center of legend and prophecy. Michelangelo was so fascinated by the sense of life and action it conveyed that he stood in front of the horse and commanded it to walk. But during the Middle Ages it was mistaken for being Constantine, a mistake to which the statue owed its escape from the melting pots of religious vandals. The legend relates that when the statue again appears covered, as it originally was, with gold, the end of the world will come and the last judgment be announced by a voice speaking from the horse's forelock. Gee, if they only made up those kinds of tales about me. On the right is the statues of Castor and Pollux, sons of Zeus, brothers of Helen of Troy. From here we shall move down the hill to the Forum. Forum Romanum and Capitolium from the northeast.
The Basilica of Maxentius and Imperial Fora in the foreground.
Rome got very crowded, and I hear it is my fault. In the days of the Republic, the Forum Square had been the center of every aspect of the city's life. Great religious ceremonies, scene of triumphs, sacrifices, important funerals, and law court functions. Plus there were the markets, many gladiatorial games, and more. But it seems that when the town grew more and I added a number of new buildings, the Forum ceased to have any real purpose.
It became too crowded with politicians and lawyers. It wasn't any fun anymore. Let us take a look at it now.
View from the Capitoline Hill. This is how it looks today. On your left you see some green grass. This is what is left of the open-spaced Forum. Here once stood three symbols of Italian agriculture, a fig tree, an olive and a vine. There was also a statue of Marsyas, suspended from a tree, waiting for his punishment. Yes, punishment for challenging Apollo to a musical contest. The statue was a warning against presumption. It was also considered a symbol of a citizen's liberty.
If you look carefully you will see a raised white platform in this area. It is the wellhead known as Lake Ascurtius. A sacred spot, the legend said a bottomless fissure appeared here and was only closed when Marcus Curtius jumped into it on his horse. There is also a column in the rostra which we cannot see from this view, but I will show you in a moment.
Farther back, on the left you can see the temple of Antonius and Faustina. On the right in the foreground is the ruins of Basilica Julia, behind that the temple of Castor and Pollux and the temple of Vesta. But there is so much in this area we cannot see from this picture. Let me show you around. As we start going around some of the sites in the forum, I have started with the arch. Not seen from the previous picture on the left of the forum. Lucius Septimus Severus was emperor from 193 to 211 AD. According to the inscription on the arch, it was built in 203 AD to honor him and his sons Caracalla and Geta. After the murder of his brother, the guilty Caracalla had his name erased and the words Optimus Fortissimus Principibus after his own name. This arch has had more influence in architecture and artworks than the arches of Titus or Constantine, which we will see later. On to something far more depressing. On the left you see the Curia Julia, the normal meeting place of the Senate. In the 7th century the Curia was converted into the Church of St. Hadrian.
Behind the Curia once stood the theater of Pompey, where Caesar was attacked by his friend Brutus on that fateful March day.
Et tu, Brutia.
Written by Caesar's biographer Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, this is what happened that day. As he took his seat, the conspirators gathered about him as if to pay their respects, and straightway Tullius Cimber, who had assumed the lead, came nearer as though to ask something. When Caesar, with a gesture, put him off to another time, Cimber caught his toga by both shoulders. As Caesar cried, "Why, this is violence!" One of the Cascas stabbed him from one side just below the throat. Caesar caught Casca arm and ran it through with his stylus, but as he tried to leap to his feet, he was stopped by another wound. When he saw that he was beset on every side by drawn daggers, he muffled his head in his robe, and at the same time drew down its slap to his feet with his left hand, in order to fall more decently, with the lower part of his body also covered. And in this way he was stabbed with 23 wounds, uttering not a word, but merely a groan at the first stroke, though some have written that when Marcus Brutus rushed at him, he said in Greek, "You too, my child?" Sorry, old man.
Thanks. In the center we see an inscription to Constantine, which is outside the Curia, which says, "To the Lord, to the our men, to Constantine, I please fortunate. I excite and happy always to Augustus, to the son, the gods conscientious constant. Augustus at the soldiers of the first legion VC Roman I am he deprives to the divine will."
Wow.
I am getting a little rusty at translating.
The rostra is where Caesar's body was brought to lie in state and where Mark Antony gave his stirring oration. It is said that the sorrowed crowds piled up chairs and benches to make an improvised pyre. What remained of Caesar was placed beneath the altar in the temple of Caesar. Let us continue on our journey.
Atrium Vestae Domus Vestalium. Lower left we see the ruins of a small circular white marble temple. Note, I said circular, something different from most Roman buildings. This was the Temple of Vesta. The ruins we see today have been recomposed from fragments of the temple.
Rebuilt after the fire of AD 191 by Septimius Severus. According to archaeological opinion, the temple's circular shape dates back to the huts of primitive Rome. Most buildings in Rome are built in rectangles or squares. This was the exception.
Above left shows an inscription on the base of one of the statues. On the right we see the area, called the Vestal's House.
Built in the patrician style round a rose-filled court or atrium, it is without a doubt the most evocative place in the whole of the forum.
You and your big words. Evocative. Can you not say the most spectacular?
Sorry.
Let us move along, shall we?
The Arch of Titus. Emperor from 79 to 81 AD.
The arch was built by his brother and successor, Domitian. It stands on the top of the Velia, a spur of the Palatine that juts out towards the Esquiline, closing the Forum Valley at its southeastern end.
The arch, erected in AD 81 to commemorate the capture of Jerusalem 11 years before, in medieval times, was called the Arch of the Seven Lamps, from the relief representing the spoils of the temple.
Is that what you're talking about on the upper right?
Yes, and in the lower left was the inscription which reads, "The Senate and the People of Rome. To the divine Titus Vespasian Augustus, son of the divine Vespasian." Let us take a look at an arch outside the forum. Before we go too far, I should tell you a little about Constantine.
Flavius Valerius Constantinus the Great.
He conquered part of England, Spain, Germany, and traveled around most of Europe. Between 324 and 330 he changed the city of Byzantium into the great Christian city of Constantinople. According to legend, Constantine walked out the dimensions of the city personally with a spear of Longinus in hand, stopping only when the voice of God told him he had measured enough area.
In 312, his conversion had already begun, and he became the patron of Christianity, the first Christian emperor. Erected 315 CE to commemorate the triumph of Constantine after his victory over Maxentius in the battle at the Milvian Bridge in 312 CE. The arch has parts from the reigns of Trajan, Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius, and Constantine himself. Let us look at the inscription. It reads, "To the Emperor Caesar Flavius Constantine the Greatest, Pius Felix Augustus, inspired by a divinity in the greatness of his mind. He used his army to save the state by the just force of arms, from a tyrant on the one hand and every kind of factionalism on the other. Therefore the Senate and the people of Rome have dedicated this exceptional arch to his triumphs."
This arch has many statues and probably one of the most beautiful in all of Rome. What is that next door?
In ancient times this was known as the Flavian Amphitheater.
One of the finest architectural achievement in the history of the Roman Empire. But it became known as the Colosseum after a colossal statue of Nero that once stood nearby. I know you think we misspelled Colosseum, but this is how the British spell it in their textbooks.
Began around 72 AD and finished sometime around 81 AD. The official opening, however, was held on a festal day in AD. Titus presided over the ceremonies, which were followed by a prolonged gladiatorial show lasting for 100 days.
It seated at least 45,000 to 55,000 people.
On to the Palatine Hill. The Palatine, the hill that has given its name to all the palaces in the world.
Most of the Roman emperors had their homes on this hill.
Stadium is part of the Palace of Domitian.
There is a good deal of argument as to whether this arena was really used as a hippodrome for races or not.
To the right we see the ruins of the home of Flavia, and above the Farnese Gardens.
Created in the first half of the 16th century by Vignola for Alexander Farnese, nephew of Pope Paul III. The garden was among the earliest botanical gardens in Europe.
They were designed in the typically Roman tradition of the vigna, originally a vineyard and later a pleasure garden. Oh, to walk through a garden.
We must move along.
The old Trajanesque column, built in 113 and nearly 100 feet tall.
A fine inscription above the door at the base records that it was erected by the Senate and the people of Rome to the Emperor Caesar Nerva Trajan Augustus, to show how high the hill had been which had stood in its place.
Really?
The marvelous reliefs covering the whole shaft represent scenes during the emperor's campaigns against the Dacians in 101 to 103 and 107 to 108.
Some 2,500 figures provided a mine of information about Roman and barbarian arms and methods of warfare.
You have been reading those travel guides again.
Yeah.
The base is covered with reliefs of trophies of Dacian weapons. The funerary chamber inside it once contained Trajan's ashes, which were laid to rest in a golden urn. The emperor's statue, which stood on the summit, was replaced by that of St. Peter in 1587.
Let us move on to some other tombs. On the upper left you see a picture titled the Mausoleum of Hadrian, now called the Castel S. Angelo. It has been reconstructed many times and contains far more than just a tomb. But below we see the most interesting of the tombs in Rome. This is not the only pyramid to stand in Rome, but it is the only one left in Rome. The tomb of Caius Cestius. According to Cicero, he was a praetor.
In the middle is the family mausoleum. Marcus Virgilius Ursus was a baker with a very big business. The famous baker's tomb, with its round stone ovens and charming frieze, representing all the phases of bread making.
I see you read the travel guides too.
It was erected by his wife Atinia.
Next is the Augustum. This vast tomb, built by Augustus as a mausoleum for himself and his family, was inspired by those of the Etruscans. Originally the enormous circular edifice was surmounted by a conical mound of earth, 44 meters high and planted with cypresses. Let us take a look at Old Rome again.
Here we see the models of Old Rome.
The area of the Colosseum. I do not see Nero's statue anywhere.
At the top of the other model we see the Theater of Marcellus.
The theater was begun by Caesar, completed by Augustus in AD 13, and dedicated to Marcellus, his sister, Octavia's son, who died at the age of 25. The Theater of Pompey was built in 55 BC. It was Rome's first stone theater and was so famous that it was known simply as the theater. Today most of the theater has been built over.
The most memorable part of Pompey's theater was its portico, the famous Hecatostellum of 100 columns, where Brutus administered justice from the praetor's bench on the fatal Ides of March. According to another tale, Caesar had in his hand a short message of warning, put there by Greek Artemidorus. Hey, do you not read your mail?
It was a busy day.
After Caesar's murder, the Senate ordered the room where it happened to be walled up.
On to something more cheerful. Rome has many things: baths, basilicas, catacombs, and fountains.
The famous Trevi Fountain, where the entire wall of a palace has been turned into a Baroque fantasy of gods and goddesses. Tritons and dashing steeds, set among wild rocks, wind-blown trees, and a leaping, glistening, rushing cascade of water.
The water comes from Agrippa Aqueduct, the Aqua Virgin, built in 19 BC. This present fountain was started in 1732. It was completed in 1762. It was made famous by something called a movie. What is a movie?
I will tell you later. The movie was called Three Coins in a Fountain.
Well, let us go see something else. Rome had many forums. This is just one of the others. Trajan's great group of buildings, comprising his forum and markets, was designed by the famous Apollodorus of Damascus.
This area contained a forum with its temple, libraries, and markets. In the upper right you can see a serving stone. This was designed to keep food either warm or cold. All depended on if it had a fire or water below.
On the left is the Via Vivatica, the street of spy shops in Trajan's market. Lower right shows the forum area. This was the best conceived forum market areas in all of Rome. We would like to go on to our last slide. Roman busts. Roman photos would be the only way to describe these pieces of art. In the upper left is me, to my right is Marcus Junius Brutus. Let me read you this one from a book. Died 42 BC. Now that is funny. Sorry. Says here he was one of the prime movers in the assassination of Julius Caesar. No kidding.
Alright, farther to the right is Gaius Octavian, better known to his friends as Augustus, first emperor of Rome. Last in the top line is Titus Flavia Vespasian, emperor, from 79 to 81.
Lower left is my good buddy, sort of, Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, triumvir, consul and imperial aspirant. See, I can be fancy too. On his right is Marcus Ulpius Trajanus, Trajan in other words, emperor from 98 to 117 and the most militarily ambitious ruler of Rome.
Next is Lucius Septimus Severus, emperor from 193 to 211. Next to him Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, emperor from 121 to 180.
And last but not least, Flavius Valerius Constantinus, or Constantine the Great. All have contributed to what you have seen here today. We hope you have found this presentation informative,
as well as entertaining. If you have questions, we will be happy to help you. We are going to take a nap.
Bye.
Goodbye.